Well, welcome to our HIMSS Maryland chapter monthly webinar. Today, we're going to be engaging in an emerging leader forum, and we're going to learn the lessons around successful remote leadership over the next hour. Want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded, so you will be able to view it later on our website. No worries. And hello, I have a lot of new faces, some members, some non-members today. So I will say hello. My name is Catherine. For those of you who don't know me, we have a wonderful program for today and upcoming January and February, some more hot topics. Please do follow us and join us for them. If you are not a Maryland chapter of HIMSS member, I invite you to join us. We have a couple of key comments that I'll share and move right on into our fireside chat. Two key points that I would be remiss is to let you know a thank you for your donation at time of registration to the Maryland Food Bank so we can continue our community charitable support. What's new is that we have begun matching your donations, and I'm excited to announce that as the holidays are upon us and right after our CFO tallies today's numbers, you'll see on social media our matched amount that we'll be donating to the Maryland Food Bank for the holidays. So thank you. And of course, a thank you to all who make this possible, which includes my colleagues on the board. There are 14 of us, too many for me to mention right now. If you check out mdhimsschapter.org, you will see them all, and they each have full teams at a committee level of volunteers helping. We are a volunteer organization, so I do thank you, and a special thank you to our generous sponsors who make all of our events and activities possible, inclusive of our member door prize today. And here you can see our core sponsors. Many of them are with us today. Welcome and thank you again for your sponsorship. And I am going to have the honor myself of participating in this fireside chat with Gracelyn McDermott. And let me very briefly let you know that she is the Executive Director of Account Management at Kaiser Permanente of the Mid-Atlantic States. She has an innovative and diverse executive background over 20 years. I'm not going to share too many details because you will pick them up as we converse today. In her role at Kaiser Permanente, she's responsible for retention and growth of the commercial accounts in Maryland, Northern Virginia, and DC. It's important for you to understand, however, that while Kaiser Permanente, of course, is one of America's leading healthcare providers and not-for-profit health plans, she has lots of other experience and, oh, by the way, has been working in remote team leadership for a very long time. So has not started this as part of the pandemic pivot, as many of us have. So she has worked in healthcare accreditation organizations. She's worked in producing tools and services to optimize care of chronic pain patients. She's worked in biodefense, biomedical, contract research, clinical trial management, which is a very germane topic today, and the list goes on. I will mention that she does have in her repertoire an MBA from Johns Hopkins, which is a thoughtful alum I'll give a nod to as well. She's also certified as a PMP. She's a member of the Leadership Maryland Class of 2018. She holds numerous board roles, including currently serving as Vice Chair of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. She is the chair of the Board of Trustees for her undergraduate alma mater, which is Mount St. Mary's University. She also participates as a board member for Vehicles for Change, Prince George's County Chamber of Commerce, and the Excellence in Foundation for PGCPS as well. As you can see, she still finds a little bit of time for her husband and her two daughters, and we thank her for joining us today and providing her time and her expertise to us. Now, I'm certain, as when I first met Gracelyn, you will learn today that she has a gigantic heart and a very captivating way about how she's going to share her many, many pearls of wisdom around all facets of remote leadership. Never mind her healthcare expertise and all those things. We'll keep that for another day. So these are important subjects that I do know touch each of us today. Many of us, many of you are challenged in managing this new normal. And we're going to touch upon some really serious subjects, but you'll enjoy a few laughs today. And our fireside chat is going to bring, in the spirit of the holidays, I'll call it, Gracelyn's expertise to kind of wrap up our day with a bow in the terms of practical takeaways from the next hour. As Jennifer mentioned, some of you may heard when we were getting on, we've had an overwhelming response to this event. So we do have you on mute, and we're going to ask you to stay on mute for the duration. However, you will find us asking a few questions perhaps along the way, and we have allocated some time at the end for questions for Gracelyn. So we'll use our chat box to be able to do so. So, Gracelyn, as I mentioned, you have managed remote teams for a long time. This is not new to you, but I imagine things are a little bit different now because you're not just managing a remote workforce, you and your teams are all working remotely, geographically spread. And I'm understanding that Kaiser Permanente and you and your team there are poised to be working from home for the foreseeable futures. So tell us what you did before in that leadership model, and now explain some of your current experiences.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Listening to you talk about all the things that I do, I got a little bit exhausted just hearing that. The good news is, and people always ask me, well, how do you balance it all, work-life balance? I think that's a fallacy. It's all about work-life integration. Although I would never have told you that my work would be so integrated into my work life, home and work integrating, because we're now all working from home. And yes, we have been working from home since March of 2020. And the announcement that we've gotten most recently is that we will be working from home at least until March 31st, 2021. And based on the conversations that I've had, there may be situations where a number of us will never return back to the traditional work environment and will be working from home for the foreseeable future. And part of that is because we have discovered that in our environment and working from home, we have been more productive than we ever thought we would be. I actually read, I understand that the human capital trends that Deloitte puts out came out today. And the research that they did showed that in Q2 of 2020, we were the most productive since 1971. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
So this whole situation is going to cause folks to rethink how they're doing. And I want to thank everybody who is on the line today, who's taken out their time to kind of listen to this. And thank you guys for having me. Like you said, this is not my first rodeo. I've been managing remote teams for a very long time. The big difference now is that before, when I was managing folks, I was managing through my regional headquarters office or what have you, and they were also in offices. So they may have been in California, they may have been in Texas, they may be in United Kingdom, they may have been in India, but every single one of them were working in an office environment and all the accoutrements that come together being in an office environment. The situation now is all of us, including myself, are all working in this virtual environment. So it's all virtual all the time. And like I said, it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. So what we're starting to see, most importantly, the impact of COVID-19 being in this pandemic, is that as we are leading and managing people, we've had to look at things through a different lens. And that lens is basically more what I call having a lot more patience and a lot more empathy.
Patience and empathy. Well, I think the rapid pandemic pivot has thrust all of us in multiple facets of work, our individual work environments and our routines now, right? We're engaging with our team, our peers, our boss. And, for many of the healthcare providers that are on the call with us today, we've had a rapid implementation of telehealth technologies and services. Now, in a double-edged sword, in order to help serve our patients remotely as well. And that certainly is a lot of change and a lot of disruption. And we really need to learn to adjust. Now, interesting that you mentioned you're more productive at home now. I think some might not feel that same way, but you also said that's both good and bad.
Mhm.
Explain to us what that means.
So here's where I'm going to throw something out at everyone on the line. Number one, to see if they're actually paying attention and listening. I want all of you, especially those who are working remotely or have individuals that are working remotely, tell me, and just by putting it in the chat box, are you working more or less hours now than you were before? More hours, the same, working more hours, more, more,
More.
definitely more. Same, but later in the day? Oh, a little more, yes. More with exclamation point on there. Same or more. Yeah. So that's exactly what I expected. And I think there were a lot more sames. I don't see a single person who has said they're working less. So you're either working the same number of hours or you're working definitely more number of hours. And I have to say, when I got excited, working and living in the DMV, traffic is an issue. And so I thought, I don't have to get up. I don't have to worry about a commute. This is going to be great. But no, it wasn't, because I was starting to work earlier and I was starting to work later. And here's what was causing that, is because we're all in the Zoom environment. So it's Zoom, 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 hour after hour after hour. Everybody wants to get on the meeting. And so by the time you know it, before you know it, it's the end of the day. And that's the only time that you can actually get your own work done, because we all have our individual deadlines and to-do lists and check boxes that we have to do. You don't get to them till 5, 6, sometimes 7 o'clock at night. And that's a major, major problem. So it's great that we're all productive, but if this productivity continues, we're going to end up with burnout. And it's going to be a major, major problem. Already we're seeing from a COVID-19 environment, mental health and behavioral health is a major issue. And even Kaiser Permanente, we have tripled the number of calls that we've gotten in this pandemic than we had pre-COVID situation. So there's things that we have to do about that, and realizing that, this isn't something that's sustainable.
Yeah, I think everyone certainly understands what you mean by that, and I struggle too. I used to have a car ride or an airplane ride giving me literally the demarcation of what I'll call my work and my play, right? I've spent years, what do? You get up in the morning, you put on that uniform, you travel to that field and you play that game, and my home, primarily was our playground for, family focus. Now, obviously we all, worked in the evenings a smidge, but I've really lost any boundaries in my work and play worlds. They've merged together. And so it's difficult to figure out, when does the day end? The list of to-dos does not ever end. So I do think being able to figure out a way to, break that cycle is something we could all learn how to do. And Gracelyn, how would you coach us on perhaps breaking that cycle?
Well, you kind of mentioned one of the things, and I love the fact that you use the word boundaries, because that's the most important thing that you have to do, is establish boundaries. When you have that commute, whether it's to and from work, those are kind of boundaries in your day. So you know when your day starts and when your day ends. And even though we're working from home, those boundaries still need to be in play. And so I always tell people, even if it's getting up and putting on a jacket or putting on your work uniform, and then at the end of the day, put the sweats on it at 5 o'clock, because that's a signal to your family, okay, mommy's off of work. These are things that happen. But the other thing is taking control of your day. And it's what we had to start doing when we recognized, oh my gosh, this is not going to end. We're in this situation for the foreseeable future. We had to establish remote working norms. And those could be a myriad of things that you put together. Three of the things that we've done is for one-on-ones or small group meetings, shorten them to 45 minutes. Don't have an hour meeting, because you give everybody a buffer of 15 minutes. They can go get some coffee, they can check some emails, they can make a quick call, whatever the case may be, but it kind of ends that rushing from one thing to the next, and it gives them that time. Even breathing, taking a deep breath and being mindful, they can do that. The second thing is when you do have those long duration meetings, because we all have strategy discussions that we have groups of people that are going to be involved. It could be 2-3 hours. Be intentional about setting breaks within those meetings. So if you have a 2-hour meeting, still build the 2 15-minute breaks or 10-minute breaks. Allow people to step away and refresh and do whatever they need. But the third thing is the one that has been a godsend for me. And it stopped me from having to work so late in the evenings. And that was scheduling work time in my calendar. So I literally, at the beginning of the week, look for white space. And it could be, actually, it's the beginning of the month and the beginning of the week that I do it. And I schedule in focus time. And that's the time that's reserved for me to do whatever I need to do, given my deadlines, resources. And my assistant knows that if it says focus time, she needs to call me and ask me before she slots in, because emergencies come up and sometimes you have to take a call, but she knows to not schedule anything in there. And I also have this special thing, and it's color coded in orange, and in big capital letters, it says, do not schedule anything. So she didn't even ask. That's sacred ground. It doesn't matter what it is. Do not schedule anything. So when people come begging for that time slot, sorry, she's unavailable. And I'm not in a meeting, so there's nobody I'm meeting with. But that is my sacred time that I set aside and put there in order to maintain a level of sanity.
Well, sanity is certainly something that we all need during this unprecedented times. And I think all of these tips will be in our hip pocket for a very long time to come, right? Well, those are some great ideas, thinking about it. I also like to get team agreement on a few ground rules when we are in some of these abbreviated meetings, right? Since you do spend less time in a shorter meeting, I try to get the team to agree on no peeking at phones or emails, perhaps.
Yes.
And I found that asking the team to participate by a video actually makes it really easier to focus on that agenda. You're resisting that urge to multitask a little bit more when there's the visual there. And so I've sort of concluded through my observations that seeing each other matters. It's important. And I've seen it build a more positive team experience and observe that to even create more productivity in the time that we do spend in synchronous interaction, meeting time as well.
And over time, that video has gotten better, because when we first started working from home, nobody wanted to turn on their cameras. There was just cameras, no thing. And after a while, again, it's about modeling behavior. I turn on mine, and then slowly you'd start to see the cameras turning on. But that FaceTime is very, very important. And that's a technique that I would definitely recommend that people do. Don't shy away from the camera, because it really does help you engage.
Well, good to hear that we're establishing some good rules of engagement in our virtual set of engagements. Now, I loved hearing your remote working norms, and let's talk a little bit more about this tried and true set of techniques that you had mentioned for managing, remote teams. As healthcare IT professionals, most of us all have our set of best practices, if you will. Would you please share what your tried and true techniques are, since you've been at this for a little longer than most of us?
Yeah. So when you asked me, you said you were going to tell me this, and I was trying to figure out, okay, which ones do I pick out? Because there's just so many. But I've come up with 3. But before I get into that, the one thing I say is very, very important as a leader. Whether you've got managers, whether you've got directors, whether you've got other VPs, you have to be a role model for your team. And so the persona that you emit and put forth to your team is what they are then going to cascade down to their team. And now I'll use an example because in this pandemic area, it's very, very vitally important that people take time for themselves, right? There's nowhere to go. People can't travel. But at the same time, you want people to take their vacations. And we've seen people foregoing vacations over this time. And I forgot, I was doing it. So finally I realized I want my staff to take vacation. I have to take vacation. And so I started to do that. And then I would even, not just the whole week, I would just take a Friday. And I'd be like, remember, I'm not here on Friday. I'm not going to be, and I would remind them that I wasn't going to be here on Friday. And by the way, you can't call me. Here's the person to call. And that person knew that I wasn't going anywhere. I was home. They could call me. That one person could call me if there was an emergency, but nobody else could. And as I started taking time off and saying I'm taking, then the rest of the staff needed to do it. So you have to think about whatever you do, be a role model. So within those tried and true method, the first thing, and it kind of ties into being a role model, is to put on your own oxygen mask, taking care of yourself. Because if you are not put together, your team is not going to be put together. You can't be that calm leader that you need to be. I will be honest with you, when they had the stay-at-home order and they sent us home, I thought, we're going to be home for 2 weeks. I'm going to take my laptop, take a couple of things. I'll be back in the office. 2 weeks came and went. 3 weeks came and went. 4 weeks came and went. And I had a panic attack. Thought, oh my gosh, this is real. This is a pandemic. This is a problem. People are dying of this. And I was in my dining room at my laptop while I'm like almost hyperventilating. And I had to push away from my chair. And I literally laid down, and I've got this beautiful window in my dining room. The sun comes in, and I literally laid there and let the sun wash over me, taking that moment and saying, okay, you're going to be okay. This too shall pass. Everything was going to be all right. And then after 15 or 20 minutes, I got up and I took my laptop and I moved into my home office, because I actually had a home office, but I was working out of the dining room. And I literally changed my mindset in that this is the new normal. This is how I'm going to work moving forward. And I was on a call after I changed my mindset, and somebody said, oh, it's business as usual. We're going to continue to work. It's business as usual. And I had said, no, it's not. There's nothing about this that is business as usual. This has never happened. The word that I'm sure all of us has heard over and over again is unprecedented all year round. This is not business as usual. And we had to recognize that being not business as usual means that we have to look at it through a different lens, like I mentioned before. So put your mask on, understand what you need to do to be that calming voice, that calming person.
Well, that's funny you talk about sort of your moment. I remember having a moment too, although my moment was not quite as organized as it seems like yours was. My moment was more like fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like fasten your seatbelts. And it was a little earlier actually than your moment. And for me, it was, I don't know what the future holds, but this is a very, very big deal. And it's actually germane to our HIMSS audience. I remember distinctly, it was March the 5th. And the reason I remember that is I was in my car, was driving in from Western Maryland towards my home from a client. And I got the announcement that the HIMSS 20 global conference in Florida had been canceled. And, that's a 40,000 plus a major 12-month, planning process. And that was one of the very first large forums that got canceled, with it being held in Florida. And that was canceled literally within days of when it was to begin. I mean, people were already on airplanes, hanging out for the weekend, down in Florida. And it just, to me, became so obvious how critical we had. And at that time, I guess I recognized it was global and national. Some of the global thought was, oh, not us, not here, right? But that was my moment. Fasten the seatbelts. What are we going to do? Our world is changing.
Exactly. And as an outshoot of that is you're feeling that way. I was feeling that way. Our employees were feeling that way. And to your point, you said, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? That fear, um, to be able to deal with that and help your employees deal with that means you have to communicate. And that's my second tried and true method for building that connectivity for successful remote leadership, if you will, is increased communication. And the difference between managing a team that you can walk around and touch base with to managing a remote team is you have to be intentional about that communication and the frequency of that communication. Immediately when this all started, we had a national command center that we set up. That was all about what's happening, how do we coordinate? Imagine PPE shortages we were dealing with at the time, staff getting ill, not really understanding how this disease was transmitted. Is it airborne? Is it what is this? All of that was swirling around. In the meantime, I'm in charge of all these commercial accounts, and my team has to communicate what's happening in terms of their employees' care on a day-to-day basis. And there was a point where we made the decision to close down all of our smaller medical office buildings so that we could concentrate our staff in our larger locations so that we could keep them safe, so that we can keep the members safe that they were coming in. And that had to be communicated. We've got 770,000 members across Maryland, DC, and Virginia that had to communicate not only from our employers, but down to the member level. So that command center information was important. They met 3 times a week. And then I would meet once a week with my staff, and not only my direct reports, my department. So we had a 30-minute call every Friday, and I needed them to hear it from me because it was that important. It was important that they knew what we were doing as an organization, how we were handling it, and what the expectation was of them. And it was important for me not to cascade it, because there are some messages that I just tell my manager and I say, cascade it down. But this was a situation where I couldn't cascade it, it was too important for me to allow it to be cascaded. So that's the difference, is knowing, understanding what type of information that's needed and the mechanism of how you're going to distribute that information. Also, not only that, is my one-on-ones with my managers, for example, had to be very intentional about what we talked about, understanding that they too had to put on their own oxygen mask and they're dealing with situations in and of themselves. So having a two-way dialogue so that they can understand and bring to me some of the things that were happening on in the field that I might not have been aware of.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that two-way, dialogue. I certainly find, given the uncertainty, more and more team members seeking more information. They'd like to have that interactive question and answer, time with you. You mentioned doing that with your managers. How did you do that more broadly over sort of the command center and the masses of all the team members that you have reporting up into you?
Well, there's the managers. First of all, you have to get consistent. I actually emailed my staff and I said, hey, I'm getting ready to talk to all these folks at HIMSS, and I'm going to give them my tried and true methods for remote leadership. Tell me, what do you think I'm doing right, or wrong? And they came back and they said, these regular check-ins were very, very important to them. And they thrived in that, but also letting them know and keeping the door open that if they needed to have, like you said, that one-on-one, that I made space for them and made it available to do that. So on our Friday calls, for example, there's 3 things that happen every Friday. That the information and the content may change, but I start off first by sharing all of the important information that impact the organization, that's going to impact them. And then I toss it to my managers, and I let my managers then, okay, what do they want to convey to the team that's relevant for them? And then I go to the individual contributors. And we literally spend time doing a round robin, calling their names out and saying, do you have anything? And then, no, everybody has to talk. A lot of times it's, I don't have anything today, I'm good, thank you. I don't have anything today, I'm good, thank you. I have a question. And then that opens up the dialogue, and they know that that's going to happen. They know to bring things to the table, and it creates a good two-way dialogue that comes from that.
Certainly does sound like you have a good sort of communication forum going there. I think you mentioned maybe you have a third tried and true you're going to share as well.
I do have a third tried and true, and this one I have to tell you, it took me years to hone, and it's odd. It's giving meaningful recognition and celebrating successes. And you think, well, why was that hard for you? I am not one of those people that grew up where everybody got a trophy. You know, you work hard, you did your stuff, and you got rewarded maybe with a promotion or a bonus or whatever. And that was good. And in my mind, for me, I was happy with that. And recognizing that that's not what motivates the masses, you know. They want to know that they are appreciated. They want to feel that they're contributors and that they're part of the decision-making process in the organization. So frequently thanking them and letting them know that you appreciate them, especially where, you know, we're in a situation where we all have targets, right? Business goals and targets. Pandemic, we're not necessarily going to hit those targets that we put forth at the beginning of the year. So that could be demoralizing to an individual on a regular basis. So letting them know that, you know, there's small wins, praising them for the behavior, even if it's not grandiose. And so it could be, you know, in public. One of the things I'm intentional about is when I am giving praise to someone, copying in someone else, whether it's my boss or it's someone that they interact with on a regular basis. Because what you don't get in a remote environment that you have in the tradition, because we can walk around the halls and you get to see somebody. So it's not unusual for you to bump into the president in the cafeteria, for example. That doesn't happen anymore. So the only way for your staff to get exposure, you have to create that exposure to them. So I'll copy in the president and let them know, hey, my team member is doing a good job, and give them that exposure that they don't get on a regular basis.
Well, nice. That's exciting. Looks like a silver lining to our pandemic, and that we're going to learn to get better as corporate cultures, perhaps, in celebrating specific workplace successes. Now, I was so struck by what you said regarding communication and the aspects of communication. I clearly agree that is of the utmost importance. So, you know, when you and I initially talked, you made mention to the different segments of staff, you know, that work under you. How do you manage communications with the staff that are so different and have very different situations? You know,
Right.
every situation today is unique.
Yeah, when we were talking, I was telling you, you know, the demographics of my staff is broad, whether it's cultural demographics, age demographics, gender demographics. I have a very diverse group of people that I lead. I have single individuals who live alone, and for them, coming to the office was you know, the highlight of their day. They got to interact with people, because otherwise they're by themselves at home. Now these people are stuck at home by themselves. Maybe they have a dog, maybe they have a cat, but they're alone. And so for those team members, you have to look out for loneliness and isolations and bring them in. And so we've had some virtual happy hours or virtual coffee talks to kind of give them that social connection that they otherwise would not have. I've got working parents with young children at homes, and that could be single parents or it could be married parents. The fact that they've got children at home is in and of itself a different dynamic, especially those children that are being remote learning, for example. So for those individuals, those may be individuals that need to disappear during the middle of the day. for a couple hours or so while they're helping their child get online, or maybe there's something going on with the network. Those are the same people that might show up later on at night. So they're online at 9, 10 o'clock at night, knowing that they had to, that portion of the day that they have to deal with. And so for those team members, it's making sure that you work with them to set appropriate schedules. I had a situation over the summer, and I was so pleased that she felt comfortable enough to say this to me. But we're talking and we're going back and forth, and she said, "Look, I'm taking my kids to the pool." I said, "Okay." She goes, "I can't. They're driving me crazy. I'm just going to go for an hour. We're just going to go to the pool. I'll be right back." I said, "It's perfectly fine, no problem," because I knew she needed to do that to maintain sanity. And when she came back, she was on. It was no problem. But the fact that she was able to disclose it to me and felt comfortable enough to let me know, that was important to me. We've got people that are caring for elderly parents. I actually had 2 deaths in my employees during this time. One was COVID related, the other was not. But very, very hard on these employees, and they needed, one individual had to take time in to go and settle their parents' estate, for example. So those are those things that you have to be aware of. And then you have those staff that they love being at home. They all day, every day, they're going to do the Grubhub. They're going to do the Uber Eats. Amazon.com is their best friend. They are happy. They don't ever want to go back to the office, and they're doing fine. But you still have to watch out for those people, because those are the people that are likely to burn out, because they're just so comfortable at home that they're always on and working. Or if they're not always on and working, they might be playing a little bit too much because they love being at home and they've got the Netflix on. Those are the people where you want to set deadlines, and you want to make sure that they know what they need to do, and as long as they get their work done, that's okay with me. So simply put, what I'm saying is, what's different now is, in the past, it was okay when Catherine came into the office for me to just know that Catherine has a husband at home and Catherine has a wife, and all of these little tidbits that Catherine might share with me. Now, I have to have acute awareness of the situation of each of my staff members so that I can help them and put that flexibility around what works for them individually. And that's where the empathy and what I call human-centered leadership really comes into play, where we've never had to worry about that before.
So interesting that you say that. There's that empathy word again, empathetic leadership. There was a recent Wall Street Journal article actually that talked about this very, very thing. And it was focusing specifically on what I'll call a kinder and gentler performance review. And, some companies are apparently eliminating portions of their performance management systems given these trying times, removing the did not meet expectations criteria, almost given the variability of everything. Do you really see that as our next step, Gracelyn?
For some companies, that could very well be the next step. From where I sit, and I mentioned it before, we're still a business. We still have goals and objectives. I've got growth goals. We've got revenue targets. We've got all of these things that we have to meet. And yes, we're scaling back because the pandemic has really put us in a different situation from an economic perspective. But at the end of the day, we're still being measured on our ability to move forward and deal with the day-to-day aspects of the what I call business drivers, whatever they may be. But going back to that human-centered nature, what you do is maybe adjust how you measure those. So don't give up on the measurements, don't give up on setting goals, but maybe relax it. So what we do when we set goals, we have threshold, we have target, and we have stretch. So the threshold is the absolute minimum that you need to do to be met expectations. target is, hey, this is the growth goal. We're targeting growth. We're targeting getting to the next level, so to speak. And then stretch is absolutely above and beyond. So you have now gone above and beyond what is expected to you. So I did have mid-year reviews this year and sat down with my staff and I said, you know what, target's gone. We're not likely to hit target. We, from a commercial membership with people or organizations having furloughs and layoffs, we have lost members. Now, fortunately for us, we've been able to move them into different lines of business, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, individuals, or what have you. But from the commercial lines of business, we're seeing some losses. So target is not even within the realm of possibility. And now that it's the end of December, I can definitively tell you we're not going to hit target. But what I say to them is say, okay, so now let's talk about what you need and what level of support is going to get you to threshold. And what does threshold look like? And making sure that we adjust that by creating that psychologically safety, that they can speak up and they can say, this is an impossibility. No, let's think outside of the box and being more innovative. Because I mentioned that we were more productive, but we're also more innovative because people are bringing different things to the table on what they need to do.
Wow, I guess it really is a kinder, gentler, human-centered time for corporate culture. And I see from the chat box that that's a subject that people are resonating with. So tell us a little bit more about what that really can mean for our workplace going forward.
Well, this is where I'm going to shamelessly steal from one of my favorite Harvard professors, Amy Edmondson. She wrote a book called The Fearless Organization, and it's all about leadership. She's what you would consider a leadership guru, and she has spent years and years and years studying different leadership. But what's different is she specifically focuses on leadership in a time of crisis. And what she has found over the last few years is the leadership that was needed during a specific crisis is now leadership that's needed on an ongoing basis. So we're all talking about us living in this pandemic era and what we've had to do in response to COVID. But the truth of the matter is many of these pressures and these environmental issues have been going on pre-COVID. It's just that COVID has now opened up everybody's mindset. So things like racial inequities, health disparities, all of those things existed pre-COVID, but now it's put a larger lens into it so that we could see it. And what Amy calls it is she uses the term VUCA, V-U-C-A. And that is the environment that we are working on a day-to-day basis, regardless of whether it's a pandemic or not. And VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that is the nature of everything that we're doing as we're going abroad on a day-to-day basis. We're dealing with volatility. We don't have all the answers. Things are uncertain. The economy is uncertain. The future is uncertain, and we're going at this level of this velocity that is so fast. And one of the things I say with the pandemic is almost a blessing because it's forced us to slow down and rethink the situation. So how do you deal with VUCA? How do you create that human-centered environment? Is you have to create psychological safety, and you do that in 3 ways. Number one, kind of like what I was mentioning with the performance evaluations, is you have to frame the work, set the stage. What's at stake? What does it mean? And how does it impact that individual or the other stakeholders that are involved? So making sure that everyone understands and is in alignment with what's at stake and what's going on. The second thing is inviting participation. So I always tell everybody, I know a little bit about a whole lot of things. The last time Catherine, you and I talked, we were talking about artificial intelligence. I am not an artificial intelligence expert, but I know a little bit about it. And so recognizing that is turning on your humility and throwing it back to the subject matter experts that you have in your very own team. You have team members that are smarter than you in certain aspects of the job. So invite their participation, help them bring the resolutions to the table. And that, in order to do that, means you have to model what I call intense listening. Other people, you heard active listening as another term that you may have heard, but it's intense listening and making sure that you're letting people know that you hear them, that you're listening to them, asking open-ended questions. And then it's not enough just to listen. The third thing is to respond productively, take some sort of action, whether it's expressing appreciation for the feedback that they provided you, but more important, destigmatizing failure. Because again, what I said is we're in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment. No one has all of the answers. So there's lots of things that we're going to do that we're going to have some failures. We have to be okay with failing. But I like to say, let's fail up. Let's learn from them. Let's move forward. Let's, of course, we want to investigate, figure out how we got to where we are, but don't dwell on it. Just enough to know, okay, what is the root cause, so to speak, but then move forward and brainstorm the next step, offer help, offer support. And what you'll see is you'll end up with a cycle of what I call, number one, shared expectations and meaning. So you'll have alignment on the work that you're going to do. Your teams are going to have confidence in their ability to speak up and offer up solutions that otherwise would not come to the table. But most importantly, you're going to foster an environment of continuous learning. And what I say to my team all the time, they love to hear it, is I want to be the best at getting better. So it's okay if we stumble, we're just going to get better. We're going to use that to help us get better. We're the best at getting better.
Wow. Well, I think we'll shamelessly steal from you, as well as those tips. The fail up takeaway, we've been, as innovators, allowing ourselves to take failure as sort of a protected, time boxed, bounded item over here. And now what we're saying is, no, we have to bring that into mainstream and rewrite the rule book, basically. Well, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today, and we have gotten to the end of our questions in the fireside chat. Let's spend our next few minutes on a few of the chat box questions, and we're going to go up until just a couple minutes before the hour. We want to give Jennifer enough time to do our member gift card drawing before everyone gets back to the rest of their day. But not surprisingly, as a lot of technologists, professionals are on the phone, we have a couple of questions about tools specific to brainstorming, since you no longer have the, walk down the hallway for that, and specific tools around targets, tools around productivity, and perhaps online work. Do you have any wisdom or examples of tools to meet any of those kinds of needs, Gracelyn, that you have begun to use?
Yes. As a matter of fact, just going back to the performance appraisal type things, is by all means, under no circumstance should the performance review be that tool that is used to measure how people are doing. As a matter of fact, what we have started doing is saying, okay, yes, we want to have these documented things so people can have a record, and if you change managers or what have you, you can go back and look at that. But it's more about the one-on-one dialogue and the ongoing discussions that you have. And what we're starting to do is, have kind of ongoing documentation. So instead of the one and done where you sit down and you do your self-assessment and then your manager assesses you, it's this constant questioning, and you design it around 4 key areas, or three key areas. So first of all, priorities and goals. So you all know what your targets are. Everybody has individual targets. I have some FaceTime targets. I have targets around competitive data, those types of things. And so there we have tools that we use salesforce.com, for example. So those are automatically dashboards that we can see, and we can look at the dashboards to see where we are on a regular basis. But that's just snapshots. We then take those snapshots and we talk about and have some key questions around what we're doing. So we ask them, what are you doing especially well? What's challenging you? How are you approaching getting to the next level or meeting the target or the goal or what have you? What are your plans to get there? Always open-ended, and then document that and follow up with that on an ongoing basis. And so again, whatever your goals, your objectives are, you outline those. You can adjust those, adapt those as you go along based on the discussions that you have. The other one is about overall performance, and that's where it's more of a kind of impact. So what impact are you making, whether it's on the organization, for us, or within the community or what have you, and measuring elements around that. And those aren't dashboard type things. Those are conversations again and discussions and outlines that you have on what good looks like. And then the third is around development. And we, as leaders, we don't spend enough time on that. Is people want to get better, being the best to get better. So you want to ask them things like, what are you enjoying about your role? What's the skill that you haven't been using? What's the skill that you want to hone? Are there any projects that you want to be involved with? And make space so that they can do that. And that's even more important in the remote environment. We talked about potential for people to have burnout. What will happen is people don't enjoy their job, and you don't realize it until you get that resignation notice. The resignation notice should not be the first tool that you see that something's going wrong. You have to be looking at development and making sure that you're having that open-ended dialogues. And then of course, my project management mind is all about status reports and what have you, but recognize that sometimes the status reports, especially in an environment like this, can be demoralizing. We used to send out, the sales, what do they call it? The rankings. Mm-hmm. The top salespeople, and send those out every month, and we would celebrate. Well, that's not fun now, because we have people that they're not meeting, they're not achieving what they want to achieve. Don't send that out broadly. As a manager, maybe it's good for me to know, but don't send that to everybody. That's demoralizing. So understanding and making sure that some of those status reports you might want to pull back on a little bit.
Well, those are certainly good tips, and we probably have time for one, maybe two more questions. I see one here specific to handling what you know and sharing that information with the team, even if it's not the complete answer.
Mm-hmm. So perfect example is what's happening today is vaccines, right? I had everybody asking me about vaccines every single day, and I don't have all the answers. No one really has all the answers. Hopefully by the end of the afternoon, unless it's happened while we've been on the phone, we expect to have emergency authorization from the FDA for the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. But people are constantly me asking that questions. And so the best that I can do, and this is what I would advise you, is tell what you know, share what you know. This is what I know today. As soon as I get more information, I will expand on that, and I will share information with you. I always tell people, I will be as transparent as possible. And if I'm not transparent, it's number one, because it's confidential, and I might lose my job if I share the information with you, and I'm not sharing anything that's confidential, or I don't know. And I will make it my job, especially if it's relevant and important to you, to know. And anything I know is going to be shared readily and as quickly as possible. And making sure you acknowledge to those individuals, I know this is not the answer that you want. I know that this is not helpful, or this may not be helpful in the way that you want it to be, but this is what I have now. And then make a commitment. Next week, here's my expectation. I will have more information for you and continue to follow up and follow through until you get that response.
Interesting, back to the subject of kind of this environment, right, and building this psychologically safe environment for all of this continuous learning, and more important than ever now to actually take those kind of visions and concepts to reality. So we are at 5 minutes of. If I see one more question pop up in the chat box, we can probably take one more.
Well, there's a question on here about what tools or approaches have you found to be beneficial for brainstorming and keeping creativity and cross-pollination happening now that people don't have to walk down the hall, conversations, water cooler, etc.? There's a multitude of collaboration tools out there. You can choose any number, Slack, Yammer, those types of things. First of all of the people on this phone should be very tech savvy, I'm sure. So technology should not be a problem. That's where you're gonna have to look and leverage those technologies to be able to do that. We use Teams in Kaiser Permanente, and we have almost probably too many Teams environments, but we have a whole bunch of team environment. And I have a specific team environment for my department. And there's a space in there that as soon as things come up, they know to just do things in the chat, and we're connected on the phone. We have all my employees have two things. They have a laptop and they have a tablet and they have a phone. And so they can be connected and know to do that. Just yesterday was a perfect example where we had to come to consensus for something, and somebody typed something in Teams, and what could have taken 3 days to get a response, within 5 minutes, everybody had their responses in, and that person was able to move on and do what they needed to do. So take advantage of that. Every now and then, again, as a leader, you have to be intentional. Every now and then, I'll just post something just to see who's watching. And it's always fun and engaging when you see those individuals. You're gonna have your introverts, you're gonna have your people that just aren't gonna engage, and for those, that's where the intentionality begins. And I haven't been, I've in those situations said, you know what, you and I haven't touched base. Can I call you? Can we talk for 15 minutes? I just want to check in. And they end up appreciating it. And in those, I've been able to uncover issues and concerns that if I hadn't reached out, I wouldn't have been able to do.
Well, I tell you what, you make it sound so simple, Gracelyn, but many pearls of wisdom from much experience. And listen, it's just a couple minutes before the hour, so I'm going to start with a heartfelt thank you from myself, our board, and all of our members, especially those that were here today engaging with you. Appreciate your time, your expertise, all the practical takeaways. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer for a last couple of minutes here to make sure we do our member gift card drawing. Gracelyn, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank all of you.
And Jennifer.
Final thing we wanted to tell you today is that due to the generosity and support of our many sponsors, we have a $100 Amazon gift card that we are raffling off today. And you do need to be present to win. So I do have a couple of names here. I'll read them in order. The first one, because we have one prize. So hopefully Tiffany Scott, are you on the line? If you're there, unmute yourself and tell us you're here. Okay, it looks like we don't have Tiffany today. That's why I draw more than one. So our winner is Michael Bernardo of Children's National Medical Center.
I'm here.
Yay, congratulations, Michael.
Well, thank you. Wow, well, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And we were thrilled that you could join us today.
It was very informative. I definitely appreciated being a part of this today.
Terrific. Well, congratulations and happy holidays.
Same to you all.
Great. And then the last thing I just wanted to tell folks was that we, in fact, do have some upcoming events. And they are, we have the next 2 months events planned in the planning stage. In January, we're going to be doing a cybersecurity event. So stay tuned for the save the date and more information. And our February event will be our annual Maryland Health IT Day. The Maryland legislature is working hard to reinvent how they go into session. And so we decided to better align with their agenda. We would wait for February and give them some time to finalize their agenda and session. So more to come on that. But thanks everyone for a great event, and we'll see you in January. Happy holidays.
Holidays.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day and happy holidays. Safe and enjoy the fun.